just have the screens up?
Yeah, I just muted you.
Check. 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. How's that look?
Try one more time.
1, 2, 3. Microphone check.
I
Check 1,
can't.
2.
It's
It's
not
subtle,
obvious
right?
that it's subtle. It's not obvious either or. I could see. I'd believe somebody if they told me that it's not a big deal. I believe somebody if they told me it's the most annoying thing in the world. Well, I don't know if I believe that, but
Yeah.
there is a quarter, half second.
Okay, how about now?
Say one more thing.
1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3.
That's better.
1, 2, 3. Too much? Too much? Yeah. 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Check 1, 2, 3. Oh my god, that's awful. I'm like a.
Give me one. I'm just throwing in the overlays just so we have them.
Yeah, I didn't log in, so hopefully, maybe. Okay. How's that look?
Better.
How's that look? Okay. We are waiting for a bunch of other people. Still delayed. We are waiting for a bunch of other people. That's too delayed. We are waiting for two. What is that noise?
Can you hear?
What? I heard traffic.
Oh yeah, I'll mute myself.
Oh, okay. I think I do need significant mic delay to make this sync. I need to hire an audio engineer or something to come in and,
That might not be a bad idea.
Yeah, this is starting to be like.
I'm I'm happy and good enough at doing the production stuff, but when it gets to like,
Yeah.
half a second to second delays, that's a little. I have no idea how that type of stuff works. Are the compass numbers fine, by the way? I did a decent job putting this together, or improvements.
We are live right now, so we need to.
That's right. Good call. Yep. All right. Cool. I'm just gonna take myself off right now. Let me know if Hello.
Hello.
Hey, Lynette.
How is it, everybody?
Doing well. Can't complain.
Excellent.
Yeah, I was just about to mute myself and take myself off the stream, so I'll be in the background.
Hey. Hey, folks.
Hello.
What's
Hey.
up? Hey, so we're already live right now, but we don't have our guest.
Why are we already live?
There was a Facebook. They would have deleted the stream.
Okay, we have to figure a way to do that.
Yeah, to not. Yeah.
Maybe just have the Facebook.
Hello, Facebook friends.
Like that.
Yeah.
Okay. How are you guys doing? Well, so Atticus said he'll be well.
He'll be on
I
time.
asked him to be. Yeah. I asked him to be 5 minutes ahead, so he'll be here in 5 minutes, hopefully. How are you?
Cool.
Yeah,
Change my.
we have 3 viewers on Facebook. Yay.
Woohoo!
Wow.
Hello.
Hello, 3 people.
Yeah. I see Bill Wendell. I see Kip Cooper.
All right.
And I'm looking forward to hearing about Padsplit too. So,
Did you
Me
guys?
too. Very cool.
Are we going into it blind? Like, because I am.
I am. I think that's
Okay,
the
good.
best way of doing it.
I opened their website up about 30 seconds ago for the very first time. So that's about as much information. I know. Totally cheating. Totally cheating.
I'd
But
love to, Rob. Like, I'd love to. Before, sorry to cut you off, Lynette, but
Okay.
I'd love to hear Rob. Like, before Lynette says anything, like, what do you think this business is? Just based on the name.
I don't know. I was thinking it's like some sort of like joint equity type thing, you know? Because there are a bunch of guys doing that sort of work.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose it could be something like an Airbnb competitor.
Hmm.
You know? Yeah. I assume it's not construction, you know?
That'd be awkward.
That would be.
Good. Sorry, Lynette, to cut you off. Go ahead.
No,
There's
no.
Atticus.
Hey, how are you guys?
Oh, he's here.
Good. All right, and we're already live, Atticus.
All right.
We had a
Surprise.
timing issue. Surprise. But thankfully, we have this thing up. I guess let's go live. I mean, we're here, right?
I was going to say,
Yeah,
then
let's go.
everybody can get the house tour. That's sweet.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, that sounds great.
It's not that exciting. Lynette, sorry. Fortunately, it's mostly empty right now, but I don't know why.
All right, and there we go. All right, so we're not going to bother with the countdown. We're not going to bother with any of that because, Albert, dude, before we begin, though, I have to comment on your amazing haircut.
Thank you. I was going to say the same, but I didn't want to be presumptuous about it. It's sharp, looking pretty sharp there, Albert.
Yeah, damn.
Tight, yeah, tighter.
It's almost like a faux hawk. It's if you went
the
higher
thing.
up.
No, it is kind of like that. That's kind of the cut. It's kind of the look.
What I'm actually a little bit more concerned about is, whether or not to comment on the fact that my 10-year-old daughter just got the same haircut. I mean, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I mean,
you're not even debating it. You already commented and
okay.
What you didn't know is that Albert identifies as a 10-year-old Canadian girl. I don't know.
She has amazing taste.
Well, I was just gonna say, I think it's, I think she has really great taste. So,
well, all right.
Anyway.
So let's actually get started because our guest is here. And Atticus, I know you probably missed the banter earlier, where literally Lynette cheated by opening up your website 30 seconds before this. We on purpose try not to know anything about our guests, so that way we're surprised when you tell us, anything about you. So I don't think we need to do intros of the three of us. You guys could check that out. We've done it in the past. But I'm Rob. That's Lynette, and that's Albert. And welcome, Atticus, to the Blueprint Sessions.
Much appreciated.
Okay, so why don't we just start with tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us a little bit about Padsplit, and we'll kind of go from there.
Appreciate it. Not sure how far you want to go back, but
Go back as far as you need to, my man.
Way back.
I was named after Atticus Finch from To Kill a Mockingbird.
Thank you. That was the first question I had.
Yeah, the question on everyone's mind.
I was thinking it could have been the bookstore in New Haven.
I'm familiar with the bookstore as well. Great paninis and black soup there. But
I spent a lot of rainy afternoons there.
Indeed. But yeah, so my mother wanted to give me someone to look up to. So I thought my parents were enough, for the record, but I guess they didn't necessarily feel the same way. But yeah, I've been in the housing space pretty much my entire career. I've been an entrepreneur for the last 16 years now, and most of that was in affordable housing, and just saw firsthand. I had a really unconventional, I think, career path, but spent a lot of time on the ground in neighborhoods and with people who were really struggling. And then on the other end was working with a lot of more traditional affordable housing programs, and was really just dismayed by the inefficiencies there. So when I had an opportunity, decided that the best way to solve this problem was through a technology solution. I had seen Airbnb and Uber and other marketplaces grow up, and felt like there were a couple things that needed to happen. One, if we were going to solve the affordable housing crisis, we needed to align incentives first and foremost. And we needed to think about what motivates housing providers and how can we motivate them to create more affordable housing. That was number one. And number two was we have to do it really, really quickly. And we have to make it possible so that anyone can be a housing provider and is motivated to be a housing provider. And so the output of that was, okay, this should really exist as a technology solution. Came to this realization in late 2016 as I had applied to this affordable housing ideas competition with this shared housing model, and that I had seen in practice for a long period of time. And the problem was I didn't know anything about technology. So set about the next year trying to figure out how do you actually create a technology company. And oh, by the way, I couldn't code to save my life, so had to build a team there as well. And but it all stems from this idea of that the best way to make affordable housing is by aligning these incentives and making it profitable for the housing providers. Because if you could show how affordable housing could be profitable, then these same sources that were ultimately contributing to gentrification and displacement and all of these things that generally have negative connotations in most cities and metro areas around the country, you could actually get them to create more affordable housing that was accountable and more accessible. Because the biggest problems that we're trying to solve are both the lack of housing supply. No surprise to anyone, I'm sure, listening, that there's just this massive disconnect between the demand for housing in this country and in Canada
Right.
versus the supply that's available. So it's all about trying to increase as much supply as we can, and we do that through a shared model because it allows us to capture all of the wasted, inefficient space that we already have existing. And humans have been sharing housing for millennia, but we're not particularly good at it these days. So
Okay.
that's really what we're trying to do.
You said two problems. What's the second problem?
Oh, access. Yeah. So it's both supply and access. So if you think about an individual who is earning $40,000 a year or less, what are their options to access housing when any private market apartment housing provider is going to require 3 times the monthly rent as an income requirement? And the answer is there are almost no affordable options available for anyone who's earning less than that, and that is a ton of people. And it's not just that income requirement; it's an upfront deposit, it is the utility deposits, it is the furnishings, it is the year-long commitment that they're not ready to make, and all of these things contribute to just their inability to find suitable options for them. And so I'm a firm believer that the more you can create, the more access you're going to provide, and the better off we're all going to be.
Okay, so I'm going to start off by asking the dumb question, because obviously I did not cheat by opening up your website.
Yeah.
So, unless I'm mistaken, you're talking about roommates, right?
Yeah, essentially. So Padsplit's vision is to create a world-class marketplace for shared housing that creates the quickest and most effective solutions for the affordable housing crisis for low-income earners. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But the easier way to think about it is moving strangers in together so that housing is more affordable.
Okay, but we're talking about roommates, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Does there have to be like a main person who has the main lease who then invites roommates in, or is it like multiple people just kind of get? Like, how does this work?
Yes.
Yeah, I'd love to hear the model. That would be awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So so essentially what we do is we will coordinate with a housing provider, landlord. A lot of times even it's just an individual with a room in their home. I rent my downstairs basement room. And you let those folks know, hey, here's a way to generate additional income from your property by renting these extra spaces. And then on the other side of the marketplace, we approach and market to low-income workers generally. Average income for us is $25,000 a year. And you demonstrate for them, here's a way that you can find all-inclusive affordable housing that runs about $625 or so per month. We bill that on a weekly basis, and it includes all of the furnishings, all of the utilities, Wi-Fi, laundry. We have telemedicine included in our services, and we even do credit reporting to the agencies so that all of our folks are generally increasing their credit scores as well. And there are a lot of people that are looking for more affordable options. So we sit in the middle to facilitate all those transactions and match those two groups together and do the screening and underwriting for the residents who need the housing. and book them into those rooms very quickly when they need options very quickly. And then we process all the payments. When you can imagine 5 or 6 people in a home, you're collecting a lot more payments, particularly because we are billing weekly, because I remember that today is Friday when no one really remembers what day of the week June 1st falls on. And then it's all inclusive. So it's super simple. And then the last piece is the rating system, which you're probably familiar for any marketplace, where roommates have the ability to rate each other and give call outs and shout outs. They have the ability to rate the property, and it creates accountability on all sides.
Love it. Amazing. So, oh, sorry, is it me next? Or is it Albert?
It's you.
Albert.
You started. It's all you. We're casual.
Well, you guys know I always have so many questions. So, and this is like, it's a reflex for me. I'm sorry. So this is really exciting, Atticus. I think, you are addressing a very underserved part of the market, the housing market, 100%. And I think you're absolutely right, given sort of the state of the housing market, the resale market now, it's becoming even more difficult for folks to get on that home ownership ladder. And so just access to housing is becoming a more critical component. So kudos to you and the problem that you're addressing. So I think it's much needed. I'm curious if, you talked a little bit about, in terms of the 2 problems, one is lack of housing supply. And I want to chat a little bit more about that as the conversation progresses. But in terms of access, how do you solve that problem in the context of, a pandemic situation? So, to Rob's point, this is kind of like roommates, right? And you're encouraging more people to live together. How has the pandemic kind of impacted the business model? Have you had to do any shifting around how you're either acquiring product or how you're matching product with people?
I would say not in any of the ways that most people probably expect. Okay. The first thing I think to keep in mind is that 40% of our population, plus minus, have been functionally homeless at some point in their lives. So they've had to sleep in their cars, not necessarily chronically homeless where they were out on the street all the time, but have had to spend the night in the airport lobby because they got kicked out, have had to bum on a friend's sofa for free for an extended period of time, all of those types of options. And so relative to the pandemic, it's like, okay, well, what are people's choices right now? And ultimately, this is clearly still a much better choice for most of those individuals than those that are available. The other thing, the major impact was financial, where we had this wave of layoffs, and as you can imagine, in our income segment, they were particularly affected. Huge numbers of frontline workers who were laid off, and making sure that we had supportive partners, and we have a number of nonprofit support partners, and have raised a lot of funds to be able to support people through those periods of time. That was a major shift. And then the other big one was actually just people who were not usually spending that much time together at the house because they were using the house to sleep and then go back to work. Now all of a sudden we're spending much more time in the house, and that just led to more kind of personal conflicts. But rates of transmission, I'm not aware, certainly over 2020, I'm not aware of any in-house transmission of COVID. There was none that was reported to us, and we've documented all those cases pretty well. Of course, we had to change a lot of protocols around just cleaning and wearing masks inside the home, and guest policies and all of those types of things that were drawn out very early on. But the impacts of the actual disease have been incredibly low on the properties or our business model or the population generally. The biggest impacts were kind of second order consequences that I think most people don't necessarily think through. But you're like, oh, shared living, like nobody's going to want to do that. These folks are in private rooms, and it's just like what CDC told you if you were diagnosed with COVID and you didn't want to get your family sick, like you stay in your room. So people were already staying in their rooms. There's not a lot of just opportunity to necessarily, or even desire in many cases to just hang out. A lot of these rooms don't have living rooms per se. They have dining rooms and dining room furniture. But suffice to say, I would gather that there were fewer opportunities when people were sitting around the dining room table eating together during COVID than there may have been beforehand.
Sounds fair.
Albert, I think you're muted.
So I think these questions are going to come in like different directions because we're all asking them differently. So sorry if you're gonna have to switch gears, Atticus. But so I'm coming from a perspective of actually having run a platform business as well, and so this seems like it's very similar to, it fits in the kind of bigger sharing economy type of framework, right? So there was a lot of boohoo, I think almost starting about 10 years ago, about like deconstructing Craigslist, right? Like taking pieces of Craigslist and then just making that a business. And this seems to me kind of really along those lines, right? In other words, Craigslist is the big gorilla in the room right now, right? When it comes to people who want to get rooms or share or even lease their room or whatever the case may be. So the problem with deconstructing Craigslist is the question of demand, right? I mean, the supply is easier to solve. It's how do you get all those people to start coming to your website and really be that front-facing kind of customer-facing platform. And so marketing is the real problem, right? So my question, that was a long lead-in, but my question is, what's the virility here, right? Like what's the marketing? Because marketing costs a lot of money. And so, what's your kind of, is there something built in with the service or built in with the way that you guys do it that assures that you're gonna get, not 100,000 people a month, but millions, right? I mean, you really need to have that kind of scale for this liquidity to work, because it rotates so quickly. And so what's your answer?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's not necessarily millions because it's all localized, right? So today in Atlanta, we are doing around, call it 250 to 280 move-ins per month. We have one vacant room out of 1,500 in Atlanta today. And like that cycle still continues. But suffice to say, I mean, the demand gen team has gotten really, really good at performance marketing. And in terms of growth loops, you absolutely have some virality in terms of members who are referring other members, or they're often repeat users. Because there's a network and because there's more supply, that attracts more members just based on locations and kind of the physical network effects. But then it also attracts when it attracts them to move when there's another place that opens up that's closer to their place of employment or their stepson or whatever the particular use case may be. And around 60% of our traffic right now is organic word of mouth. So it's like CAC and is an issue. It's always a concern, but it's actually declined for us over time as the network effects in a market like Atlanta have compounded. And we certainly anticipate that as we add more units in more markets, that the same trend will start to occur there as well. I think that's probably true for a lot of two-sided marketplaces. But yeah, there are a number of growth loops that are happening. And it's interesting though, I mean, as you compare it to Craigslist, and yeah, I mean, I think a lot of that is true in that you're kind of deconstructing that model. But the other big thing that I think is a differentiator is I'm not aware of many, if any, just funnel created lead generation engines that operate within a housing space. And that's effectively what we've done to attract, screen, and curate those leads, where not only can we get those bookings within hours, but you can get those people qualified and moved in within 48 hours. And I think that's a viral product.
that sounds great. And that actually leads to my second related question, which is, so quality control really matters here, right?
Yes.
So it matters so much more for this business because roommates, like that's, I mean, how do you really match that up? And you know, in the States, people have guns, you know, so like that has to really work well for, you know, so can you tell me a little bit about that? Because, you know, the rating system, that's cool, but we know that has flaws. Like, how are you really making sure that that's robust and it's going to get more robust over time?
So the single biggest tool in our arsenal to address quality control is choice and flexibility. And right now our agreements are 1 week, and we may move to a 1 month, you know, where they have to stay 1 month initially at a minimum. But the long story short, and we did a lot of research with universities and their housing systems and how they place roommates or match roommates or any of the above. And the trend more recently, as you may be aware, is that they're doing a lot less matching and much more empowering of those users to match themselves. Because when you match them, there's a very high likelihood that someone has lied on their application and they are not nearly as clean or good looking as they have advertised themselves to be. And who gets blamed for that? The platform or the university, in that case, gets blamed for it. And so the counter is to say, allow those people to advertise themselves and to make their own choices. And in our case, as a marketplace, it is to provide many, many, many more choices in the marketplace and the flexibility to go pursue those choices. If you arrive at a home and you decide, oh, wait, this house is really dirty and I have some messy roommates, I don't want to stay here. I want to transfer to this other one very quickly. And so that's really where the liquidity issue becomes more important, and why we have to keep onboarding more and more supply. But long story short, you put those decisions for whatever it might be. I mean, it could be not necessarily a quality control issue, but you just don't like the way that someone's playing their music or anything about the home, or there's all sorts of different issues that create quality control issues for anyone across the board. I'd say what it really boils down to, and our guiding principles are care, show it, prove it. And that's our expectation from all stakeholders. And like lots of different people can live together and live together copacetically for a long, long time if they simply are respectful of one another. And so it's a lot less didactic and a lot more, I'd say, pragmatic and empowering to just say, hey, this is our expectation that you can be a kind, independent, respectful adult. And if you can't, then there's probably going to be a problem and you're not going to be a great fit. But also giving people the ability to identify those bad actors, but make choices for themselves.
So existing roommates, sorry, just adding on to this. So existing roommates can also select the incoming person, I assume. And also, are there enforcement mechanisms built into the platform? In other words, like, can I report my roommate, or do I have to like do it face to face? Like, you know what I mean? Like,
you absolutely can. And yeah, we get a lot of those calls that Lynette stole my cheese, or Rob is smoking in his room, or anything like that. And that's a huge part of the value add that you're certainly not going to get from Craigslist.
Okay, so good news and bad news. Good news is we have a lot of interest on you guys. The bad news is they have questions, and since we've not had questions on previous streams, I'm just gonna let them ask the questions. So I'm gonna start with the easy one. Let me do the easy one first. So this comes from Emily Chenevert, who is the CEO of the Austin Board of Realtors. So she knows her shit. So
yeah.
This is a question. How is Padsplit taking on the legislative issues associated with this model, specifically where there are local ordinances that define occupancy in a way that is not conducive to leveraging property this way?
Love this question. Yeah, this is so it's I've actually written a fair amount about this in multiple places, but write a column for Forbes as well, and have talked about this there lots of times. But the simplest way to answer that question is asking another question, which is, do you believe the people that are serving your community deserve an opportunity to live there? And I would certainly hope that anyone listening replies to that question with yes. And the reality is, as you look at any major metropolitan area today, at least in the Western Hemisphere, the answer is unequivocally no. that they do not have that opportunity. And then the question is, well, why do they not have that opportunity? And as you look at those laws, and for the less informed, that often restrict occupancy to related family members or a certain number of unrelated family members, that gets really dicey. In the Atlanta metro area, a lot of people don't know, we actually have 83 different jurisdictions, and 83 of those jurisdictions each have their own definition of what constitutes a family. In the city of Atlanta, it's up to 6 unrelated persons, not including domestic servants. You can have as many domestic servants as you want. In Cobb County, it's only 2. In the city of Doraville, it's 2, and grandparents and cousins or uncles don't count. So the short answer is it's completely arbitrary, depending on the local jurisdiction, how they define family. And do we as a populace think that is the right way to do it? Meanwhile, over the last 60, 70 years, you've had this trend where in 1950, the average square footage home was 900 square feet or so. And today it's north of 2,500, 2,600 square feet. So it's almost tripled. Meanwhile, family size has declined by 20 to 25%. And there is a greater share of one-person households than there are of either nuclear families and single-parent households combined. So you have this huge mismatch between the housing stock that exists, which is largely large single-family homes, and the population that is most in need of housing, which are one-person households. So that's really the gist of how we attack it, is one, on a belief standpoint, and do you believe this is actually representative of your values? And number two, here are the facts. We acknowledge we have a housing supply problem. It's been on the front page of every newspaper. How do you fix it? Because guess what? There's no way that you can build sufficient affordable housing and solve this problem. If you look at the most successful affordable housing program from a subsidy standpoint, by far low-income housing tax credits here in the States, and they've created 3 million units over 30 years. Well, right now there's a shortage of 12 million units. So you're going to wait 120 years and come up with $3 trillion just to build those units. And that's only for the population today, not anticipating whatever happens over the next 120 years. It's just nonsensical and doesn't work. So the question is, do you want a solution or not? Because for me, the easiest solution is, hey, we can create unsubsidized, deeply affordable housing that's qualifying people that are earning less than $15,000 a year, and it's not going to cost you anything. So like you as a city or a community or different set of local stakeholders, like you're going to choose, or you're going to choose to continue to have this massive supply crisis where none of the people that are working in your community have the ability to live there. There's going to be exceedingly long commutes, dramatic impacts on the environment, so forth and so on.
So it almost sounds to me like the answer to Emily's question is you're making those arguments to the municipalities, to the government agencies.
Yeah.
How is your success rate with that?
It's still early. I mean, listen, we're a lot faster at acting as a startup and doing rather than legislating. So we have been lobbying consistently across the board. The short answer is you figure out a way to work with that municipality in some way, shape, or form. And some are much more lenient in their interpretations of those regulations, many of which were written 100 years ago, than others. And the ones that are not, you just don't go there.
All right. Well, it sounds like you want to reach out to your local realtors and chat with them because they've got some. But here's the second question from Bill Wendell. And this is, I think, related to kind of the question that Albert asked, kind of some of my questions. So Bill Wendell's question is, sounds like you're reinventing rooming houses as a service, which is a place in the market, but renting to strangers raises red flags, at least for me. I think it raised red flags for all of us. And his question, why not curate micro-communities? I'm not entirely sure what micro-communities are there, but maybe you could just address that as well as, kind of the red flags.
Yeah. Do I have the ability to share my screen, Rob?
Don't know. I believe so. Give it a shot.
Let's try.
Yeah.
I want to show you a photo because this will put it in perspective.
Work technology.
There you go.
Work.
There you go. All right. So these two houses, can you guys see that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So these two houses are right next to each other. And this gets to why I started Padsplit. The house on the lower left is a rooming house, is a traditional rooming house. And as I knew and still know some of the people that live there. And they were paying $120 to $140 a week to live in that rooming house. And I was wondering why on earth is someone paying that much to live in that house? The house in the upper right is my house, and it's right next door. And this was the first Padsplit location. And so the answer to the question is absolutely yes. Are we reinventing the rooming house or lodging facility or congregate home or whatever you want to call it? Are we reinventing that market? And the answer is yes, we absolutely are. And the fact that this home on the lower left is still 100% occupied should tell you something about that market. And you could go to lots of houses, I don't care where you are, and that are exactly in this condition or worse, that are fully occupied. And the short answer is because the supply is so bad, there are no options. And that's why people are forced to live in those squalid conditions. There was a great New York Times article, it's about a year ago now, about all the immigrants who are living in basements that are like chopping up little basements with no windows or lighting or anything. And there are thousands and thousands and thousands of them in New York City. But like, why do they exist? They exist because you have this huge supply issue. Is it strange for strangers to live together? Maybe in today's culture, but humans have been cooperating and living together since we were in caves. So it's certainly a lot less weird than the alternatives for those folks in need. And there's just an incredible number of people that need better options and better choices. And our idea is you shine a light on those types of housing and give those people better choices so that they will make them.
All right.
Can I jump in a little bit here with a question? So it seems like to me that there has to be a huge focus on this quality of that life being really good. I mean, this might sound very micro, but like, in other words, that living with strangers, that there's a value there beyond like that people don't feel like it's a halfway house. People don't feel like they're just in a room with like a bunch of poor people. I hate to say it, but like it has to turn into a cool thing, or there has to be a community element that's really cool about this living. Otherwise, I think there's a lot of pitfalls. I'm curious how you're thinking through that. Like, how do you make better living for people without just leaving it in their hands? You know what I mean? Like, I feel like there has to be mechanisms in place.
We start
or whatever.
Yeah. So I certainly agree with just creating standards in general. Disagree a little bit with the community aspect, because what you'll find is organically, it's like how you get friends, right? I mean, you don't just say, hey, you have to go together and you guys are going to be friends. Like, those relationships happen very organically, and we see the same thing happen in houses. The way that we address a lot of the pragmatic issues in quality control is in the brand standards. So we're only onboarding houses that meet our requirements and specifications early on. Like, those are all based off of HUD requirements. So I was a housing choice landlord with the local housing authority here for many years and still am. And they make it super easy. Any house that they're going to put somebody in, you have to meet these basic standards. So we started there and then increased those standards. And so that's why I am very confident that all of these houses are much better quality than anything else that exists, certainly in a rooming house capacity, or even most rentals, in terms of fire safety and I mean, we have automatic fire suppression over the stoves and smoke detectors in every room and making sure the windows open and those types of things. Not to mention just the screening mechanisms for all of these residents, which certainly don't happen in that rooming house world or example. And so just like setting a higher baseline, I'd say is the biggest thing in terms of blocking and tackling. But yeah, I mean, we certainly foster, to the extent that we can, better relationships within those communities. But a lot of people just want their base standard, where they want a room they can go to that is clean, safe, and quiet. And that's it. That's all they want. They don't want to go there to make friends. They want to go because they're working the night shift, and they want a place that's quiet during the day that they can lay down their head to rest, because all they're thinking about is getting to work that next evening. In other cases, we've seen, I heard a case yesterday where a house got together and they all took a trip to Miami together for vacation. Another one where they have a house set up where there's a chef that lives there, and she cooks. She buys the groceries. They all go in together, and she cooks for everyone in the home.
Like, can I sign me up?
Yeah. Those stories are cool. That's what I mean. Like, those stories, to me, it's like, it has to be tip of the spear when it comes to marketing and how you guys are trying to attract this book, because that appeal is actually huge, I think, especially now during COVID times, right? So so I'll stop there. But I love it.
Yeah, Lynette.
That's okay. Yeah, Atticus, this I'm really kind of warming up to this a little bit, and I love all of the aspects around addressing a lot of those social components that you're really bringing to the table. And again, to your point, they've been around for a long time. Kind of with the current mechanisms and the current approach that government and others are taking, it's going to take a really long time to address this kind of increasing problem. But with my VC hat on, I want to shift a little bit back to kind of the business model and a little bit more internally, because I think, there is an increasing awareness in the VC community on what it looks like and what it needs to look like to support these types of initiatives, because there is profitability in this. And I want to come back to something you said at the very beginning of this interview, which was, we have all of this massively kind of wasted and unutilized space that already exists in the ecosystem that we're really not cutting loose. And when I think about that, just from a pure investment point of view, that's just asset value we've not yet unlocked, which is really what I'm hearing your approach is with Padsplit. So my question, it's basically the laundry list of metrics that any VC would ask you is, what is your total addressable market? What have you guys raised to date? What's your, kind of, how are you onboarding both the rate, I guess, at which you're onboarding both new supply relative to meeting demand? Are you raising? If you're raising, what does that look like? How are you addressing? It's all of those questions, but let's just peel it back. And I'd love to start with, you've mentioned some support from, some government, from some not-for-profits, if I can get around my own tongue. I'd love to know kind of who's backing you to this point, how much you've raised, if you're looking to raise, and if you are, kind of what your objectives are with that money, notwithstanding all of the political challenges and regulatory hurdles that you have to also address.
Sure. Yeah. So try to cover that as quickly as I can. There's a lot in there.
There's a lot always in there. It's like
a mini pitch. Like Atticus has.
I don't know. It's time for a quick session again. So 14.6 million is what we've raised through 2 rounds. We've raised our seed and our A, and we'll probably go out for our B in June. That's the plan, and working towards that. Having early conversations now. The major investor is Core Innovation Capital, based in LA and San Francisco. Of course, their mission is democratizing prosperity, mainly a fintech investor, and we have actually a lot of overlap with fintech, since housing is obviously the biggest portion of the capital stack for any individual in terms of consumer spending. Let's see, number of units, we just crossed 1,600 total units. We were started, theoretically, I founded the company in 2017. We were in Techstars Atlanta cohort of summer 2018, which is when I got the other members of the founding team. And so that's really the jumping off point. We have opened 8 new markets, really opened 5, and we'll open an additional 3 more here over the next couple months. The overwhelming majority of units are still in Atlanta, but we've got a pipeline to we have a couple different stages of growth in a market: seed stage, growth stage, stabilized. Stabilized for us is 800 to 1,000 units in a market, where we start to see those network effects start to compound. And we have 200 that are under development coming soon within the next 2 months, but are under construction or being activated in 3 markets. And then we have a pipeline of another, let's see, 1,400 or so that are committed and identified properties and so forth. And then there's actually a pretty significant amount of capital that has already been allocated to buy or build new units in those markets as well. Trying to think of what else I didn't cover from that. Anything else specific?
Yeah, no. So I'd like to actually follow up on that, because what you just said is, this was sort of my question. Did you just say you're buying and building units?
So we are primarily a marketplace. One of the biggest hurts for us in COVID was the fact that we couldn't go market to owners in new markets. So one of the things that we did to be able to launch new markets during COVID was we created a third-party entity that's a fund, a housing fund. And so they have a commitment for a pretty big chunk of change to go buy units in new markets. They have today only purchased, call it 25 houses in new markets, but that number is set to get pretty large.
Okay.
And there are another 4 or 5 owners that are of, I'd say, kind of sub-institutional, but still significant, that are buying and or building in new markets as well.
Okay, so you're I mean, in a real way, you could say you're kind of removing houses from the marketplace for family ownership, right?
I think, I mean, it's a fair critique. The difference is, in most jurisdictions, you could literally solve your housing problem with less than 4% of the existing single-family housing stock.
Right.
So it's simply a question of, are you making that stock more efficient, right? You have lots and lots of 3 or 4 bedroom homes, and 73.5% of the population are non-families, like 1 and 2 person households, but only 12.5% of the housing stock in the United States are studio and 1 bedrooms. So that's really the issue. It's not necessarily that you are taking active units out, because you're putting more people in those units that would be occupied by 2 or 3 people. And now you're saying, okay, well, I can put 6 people in that same house, and ultimately creating more efficiency in the market.
And then my real question that I had was, are you seeing this adoption by individual? Because you mentioned, institutions, you mentioned investors, and I could see from an investor standpoint, okay, I make more money if I turn this 3-bedroom into a Padsplit, right? And charge 4 people, whatever. Are you seeing any traction from families that own homes? Because again, one of the things you mentioned was unlocking bedrooms, unlocking supply. And I'm thinking about Atlanta area, like there's some big homes out there, my man, out in Gwinnett and, some of the, I can't imagine those people wanting strangers living in their spare bedroom. So are you seeing adoption?
Yeah. I mean, so we just haven't pushed there, right? I mean, there's this big strategic question around where do you have product market fit and what do you focus on first? And ultimately the vision for the marketplace is that anyone anywhere feels as comfortable renting that room in their home as they do stepping into the back of the Uber. And like I've been renting a bedroom in my basement now for 14 months to the same person that we don't know. And so people will do it. We've run it as a pilot program primarily for the owner-occupant model. And so we do have a handful of those. But as you look at rates of adoption, expansion, and virality, it's much, much higher on the investor side across the board, whether that is like a mom and pop retail investor, stay-at-home mom who was interested in real estate and now owns 10 houses, or this sub-institutional group who says, hey, I want to invest in real estate and we've got a big pot of money to put somewhere and I'm going to go chase yields. And this is like far and away the best risk-adjusted yield around. So like that runs the gamut. But for us, strategically, we look at the consumer market more as phase 2, where we have built the trust. Because today, if I told all of you, hey, okay, well, do you believe the people who work in your community deserve to live there? You'd say, yeah, sure, but that doesn't mean I'm going to rent my extra bedroom to them. And at the same time, if I asked you, hey, you guys want to go hitchhiking later, you'd all look at me like I'm nuts. But then we say, oh, we're going to hop in this Uber, and nobody thinks twice about it. And so it's just a question of cultural perception and where can you build enough normalcy that it just becomes more common practice. And if you know that this is a thing that exists and it is reasonable to do, and it's not like hitchhiking, then I think you're much more likely to do it. So it's just a question of getting to a sufficient scale before we can really look at the consumer market.
Okay, cool.
Awesome. So Atticus, really quick, I'm not sure it's clear to me yet how you currently market. So what your marketing channels are for, particularly on the demand side. And then I'm also curious how you're engaging the real estate community, if you're engaging in it at all currently, and if you've thought about that at all.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I've been a real estate professional for pretty much my entire career. And so still wear that hat. It's probably stuck to me, but certainly engage in the real estate community. The most effective way is through just networking with investors and saying, hey, here is an option. Are you interested in potentially doubling your yield or your return on cost? And the answer is almost always yes. And particularly when we say you can do that, and maybe they care about the social good element, but mostly they care about the bottom line and why I think it's so important to align those objectives. But I mean, we haven't had a significant sales team in any capacity. Right now, we have a team of almost 90 folks between FTEs and contractors. 3 of those are dedicated to sales, and 2 of them are within the last 2 months. So it's almost been entirely organic on the supply side, where if you looked at a cohort analysis, our churn is actually negative for hosts. And after the average host does their first unit, they will do a little over 2 more within the next 18 months. And so that's how we've grown to date. And so that side hasn't really required significant marketing. We've only just started within the last, call it 3 months or so, as we've expanded to these new markets where we're lesser known. On the demand side, it's every channel imaginable. It started, as I mentioned, like we're still 60% organic growth on the demand gen side, but then it's Google ads, it's Facebook Marketplace, it's Facebook ads, it's kind of every Zumper, Zillow, Apartments.com aggregator out there, and just making people aware that this option exists.
Awesome. I wanna keep going on this like business plan piece a little bit too. So I think, and it was also one of the kind of one of the viewer questions. So meaning, I'd love to dive a little bit more deep into the guts of how this business model works, because there's this mission problem, right? So we want to keep like the housing affordable, right? And it's two-sided as well. So there's pressure on both the buyer side as well as the renter side, because the renters also want to make more money. So where do you guys get your cut? And so let me be a little bit more specific with my question, which is, how do you model out your business, right? So what are the main variables there, right, driving profits? And I'm even curious, like, how do you define a unit? You know what I mean? Like, is it per rent, per contract? Is it per person? What does that model sort of look like? And the big kind of gong at the end is like, what's the top side, right? How much are you really thinking you can earn? What would your EBITDA numbers look like in a really fantastic world, right?
Yeah. So I mean, if the short answer is, and I know Lynette had asked earlier, like TAM. I mean, TAM is absurd. It's multiple times larger than an Airbnb type of TAM. I mean, you're talking about $41 billion in ARR TAM for the U.S. alone. So it's almost silly to talk about. In terms of the business model and just how you reconcile that with the mission, I'd say a couple points. One, I don't think you can serve this population and be in this business if you're not mission driven. I really don't. I mean, just if all you're interested in is creating a really big business, you could certainly do that in higher income co-living or other sort of real estate technology endeavors. Like there are lots of easier ways to make money than getting the call I got this morning about someone who was mentally unbalanced in a hallway that needed to be picked up. Like most founders who are looking to just start businesses aren't interested in doing that type of work. And like our customer experience team, they're part social worker, part angel. Like that, it's part and parcel of it. The business model for us has been pretty simple to date, which is it's just marketplace. We take a cut of the revenue only when we place that member. Subject to change over time, but yeah, it's been pretty basic so far. And again, that TAM gets pretty big. The other thing I'd say relative to the mission and how we reconcile everything, we chartered as a B Corp, a public benefits corporation, and part of that charter is providing housing for folks that are earning less than 80% of the yearly income. So we're certainly conscious of that in the investors that we talk to, and try to avoid, if possible, this idea of what Ross Baird refers to as two-pocket investing, where you have your giving philanthropy pocket and your investing pocket, and those two are absolutely not connected. For us, it's part and parcel of what we do, and it's to the growth engine too, right? I mean, when we have members who graduate that are able to purchase their own homes or buy their own cars or start their own businesses, and we've had all of those. Those are outstanding cases for third-party validation for other new members. And of course, they're very likely to tell their friends that, hey, this program helped me get a leg up. I heard a great quote yesterday in one of our surveys. It's like, it's almost like whoever designed Padsplit was trying to think of how they could help us. I was like, yeah, that's exactly right. So it's cool to kind of see it working, but yeah, the business and revenue generation model to this point has been pretty simple.
Can I ask a real quick question? It's not really a follow-up. Does Padsplit work for families? How do you guys do it?
I mean, it depends on family. So we have
husband and wife, 3 kids.
Yeah. So not really. Not today in our current iteration. I think there's really a world in which we could. We are an all-inclusive, on-demand rental model that bills weekly or per payday. And so is that a service we could provide for families? Absolutely. Could we go run this model and stand it up for an entire apartment complex or the accessory dwelling unit in your backyard? Absolutely could do it. No question about it. Everything still works just as well as it ever did. The reality is it's not much of our inventory. And we just haven't really pushed on providing that.
Right.
But I certainly think there's a benefit for families as well to say, do you want really affordable options, even in a shared facility with all-inclusive payments? And I think the answer would be yes.
So quick follow-up on that is, since it's a pay weekly, every payday type model, is that cheaper than paying monthly or more expensive?
I mean, for us, it doesn't matter.
I know for you, for the renter.
Same. I mean, the biggest issue for us is collections and just remembering. I'm going to ask you guys a question now. Tell me what day of the week July 1st is.
No idea.
Nobody knows, right? Nobody knows. But the entire rental industry banks on the tenant knowing and budgeting around this first of the month. But I know today is Friday, and if I happen to get paid on Friday, and I know that all of my living expenses are due on the same day, it's much easier and much more likely that I will actually make that payment, as opposed to your water bill is due on the 5th, and your cable bill is due on the 14th, and your furniture rental is due on the 17th, and just keeping all that straight, because these folks don't have the luxury to just put it on auto pay and go, right? I mean, they're living hand to mouth, and so that's a huge aspect of what we do.
Yeah, but I mean, like I said, the thing that concerns me about this is if I'm, low income, right? I don't make that much money, then presumably, yeah, you're talking about making it a little bit easier for me, maybe a little bit nicer. If I'm paying $1,200 a month, if I were to get a monthly lease, versus going through Padsplit, I end up paying $1,400 a month because it's weekly.
Same.
It's the exact same.
Yeah, I mean, I don't really. If someone chooses to pay monthly versus pay weekly, the difference is not.
Okay.
There is none. Like you can choose whatever pay cycle you want.
So then, from the investor standpoint, it's a wash whether I rent by the month to a long-term rent tenant or I go through Padsplit.
Well, the difference is in just the underlying pricing model for Padsplit relative to market rate housing. And so if you look at a traditional market rate model, the first bedroom is market rate. That's it. It's diminishing returns from there. The second bedroom is never worth 2 one-bedrooms. Third bedroom is worth less.
Gotcha. Okay.
Fourth bedroom is almost nothing.
Gotcha.
So the reason it can be both more profitable and more affordable is because you take that first bedroom, and we're marketing to one-person households, or occasionally 2 if it's a parent and 1 minor, but that's really
gotcha. Yep.
And you say, okay, well, we're going to build 67% or whatever of the 1-bedroom cost, but it's not diminishing; it's incremental from there.
Okay, so cool. Can I just follow up to that piece, because this comes back to also the business model in terms of, so if I have a home and I have 3 rooms that I want to put on Padsplit under that model, am I tied to, as the homeowner, am I tied to a minimum residency? So I think you mentioned weekly or monthly, because from my perspective, every time there is a tenant churn, there's an additional cost. There's maintenance, upkeep, cleaning. So this is coming back to the Airbnb model where, Airbnb arguably isn't necessarily market rates on rent, right? It's massive. There's a massive margin on a typical rental marketplace that wouldn't be accessible to me through Padsplit. So how does that get rationalized in the model?
Yeah, so it's funny, and nobody ever really kind of gets below the surface on this. But the biggest advantage of the model compared to a traditional one is actually lower vacancy and lower turn cost. And I'll tell you why. It's because the turn cost on an individual room is negligible, maybe $100. There's a $100 move-in fee, and our average turn cost on a room is about $100.
Okay.
As opposed to if you're renting an entire apartment or house to someone, the turn cost is in single family in the many thousands of dollars. I've had at least a dozen cases where I've spent more than 20 grand, even just for wear and tear, because of you got to repaint the whole house, you got to redo the floors, replace the carpet, so forth and so on. And so the turn cost is dramatically different. And then in terms of vacancy, when you have a vacancy, you have 1 out of 5 or 6 or however many rooms you have in a house, and the house is never sitting completely vacant where you're susceptible to theft or vandalism or just broken pipe that nobody notices, any of those types of things. And so that ends up to significant difference in NOI over time. And really how I ended up with this model was because I was comparing some of these shared housing arrangements starting in 2009 when I started buying in 2008 against my traditional SFR and apartment portfolio to see like, oh, wow, like that's super interesting that there's this massive difference. But you do have certainly more turns. They're just much lighter turns. But the average stay, look, again, our minimum agreement for years has been 1 week. But if you look at our tenure rates on average compared to the higher end co-living companies with, call it 6 to 12 month minimum stays, they're almost identical. Right now we're right at 9 months. It's like 8.78 months for a trailing 12 average, and that's with a 1 week minimum. So you will have more kind of room cleans than you would otherwise, and I'd say maintenance overall is a little bit higher. But when you compare that against your CapEx on a turn, it's not even close. And so that's really why one of the underlying reasons why it just works a lot better. At least
Cool.
for houses. I mean, less so in like, if you got like a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house, then it's probably a lot less beneficial.
Cool. Thanks, Atticus.
Yep.
If there's silence, I'll jump in.
Jump in, man.
So let me shift gears a little bit and talk more about some of these operational pieces, because that's what I find most fascinating. And I think on the ground, when the rubber hits the road, there's all sorts of stuff that pops up that you never expected. So I'd love for you to kind of comment on something that you've discovered that you didn't expect to discover after the rubber hit the road, right? So something that has been challenging, like, oh shit, how do we solve, God, people can't have sex, or whatever, or parking is a problem. So one of these operational things that's been a challenge, and secondly, something that you've discovered that's been an opportunity, like something you didn't expect at all since you've gotten into the business. So one challenge and one opportunity.
Yeah. So this actually predates Padsplit and it was kind of core to our founding, but it's one of my favorites, which is that bad things happen on sofas, and I won't give you too much of the gory details. But suffice to say, one of the biggest learnings was that the more kind of common area lounge spaces you had, it was a greater opportunity or a greater risk of conflict than it was a benefit for
That's awesome.
Maybe it depends who's communing together, but you get the gist. And so that's certainly, I think, one of the unexpected challenges, takeaways, and why when people ask me about furniture, I think about just kind of architectural design and choices being in a kind of dining room chair type of format as opposed to a lounge type of format. That's a big learning, and I think a really big difference that takes people aback. The other one in terms of opportunities, I think something that we've seen that has I think floored a lot of folks is just how quickly we can get rooms filled for permanent housing, or at least semi-permanent housing, even though it's a pretty flexible option. And as you think about demand gen and aggregation there, and I think there's potentially a big opportunity for us in that field as well, whether it's for singles or families or what have you. But just with this all-inclusive model, and we've honed the demand gen well enough now over the years that we're really getting these units booked absolutely as quickly as you could possibly think about booking them.
That's awesome.
And I'd say one other one, which is I've got a call later today with a city who's got a massive homelessness problem. And what I would love to be able to do is convince a city or a nonprofit to go rent a bunch of houses or buy a bunch of houses. Because today, my biggest fit is with an investor who's trying to drive the bottom line. And there's absolutely conflict there sometimes where we're like, look, you have to bring your prices lower, number one, to meet the market and just where demand gen is, but also because it's the right thing to do. And you need to understand as an owner, it is in your best interest for this person to stay much longer, and they will only be able to stay much longer if you make that rent more affordable, and to think more about the NOI as opposed to the gross. But with a nonprofit or a city who's facing a massive housing shortage, they should absolutely consider looking at a shared model, because it's far more efficient. I think you asked earlier about micro communities, or someone did, and think about just the efficiency of being able to use existing space that is heated together, and just like the environmental efficiency, heating capacity of building tiny homes that are all kind of separate walls, all open to the outside, versus one enclosed structure. It's not remotely comparable. And if they build those units or buy those units or even just rent those units, there's no desire for them to have the markup. They just need to take care of the logistics, and that's something that we can do pretty easily.
Hey, there's a really great question from Drew Myers here, who's like listening in, is asks, have there been any fair housing issues you've had to deal with? How do you determine who gets the units?
Yeah, I mean, it's first come, first serve for anybody who qualifies. So short answer is no. We haven't had any fair housing issues. I mean, fire code limits us to 2 people per room, and so it's not like a family couldn't apply and take 3 rooms in a house. They could absolutely do that. Mm-hmm. The difference is we need an adult in each room. So if you had 2 parents and 2 kids, for safety reasons, we would require an adult with a minor in each room. So that might be a little weird, but it's not like it's prevented by any stretch. And we've actually had people do that before. It's happened in at least one case that I know of.
All right, and then I have a question that's just because you had mentioned something, and I know Uber has this issue, right, where if there's bad behavior, mm-hmm. right, then the way that Uber seems to deal with it is just through reporting. You know what I mean? There's no, because I've actually looked at it, and Uber does not cover, it doesn't pay out if you're a rider and you're actually really injured by what the driver's done. Or the flip side, I'm a driver, some rider gets in, does some crazy shit, and I get injured. You know, Uber's just like, hey, the insurance is really just for like car accidents, right? Do you guys provide liability or some sort of coverage or some sort of insurance?
So we carry GL today that covers our negligence. Like if we approved someone who we really should never have approved and they end up causing harm, like we have a GL policy for that. But it's not, I mean, we're not at the size yet where we can do what Airbnb does with like the host guarantee, where if there is a party and someone damages your house, then like they have this fund. Would really love to be able to get there in the not too distant future, but we're not of a sufficient size to be able to do that today. The biggest thing is working with insurance providers and insurance companies who will underwrite the owners under their homeowners policy. But like the homeowners policies exist, and that's a pretty standardized resource that people are accustomed to. Like tree falls on your house, tenant burns down your house, like any of the above. Like you have homeowners insurance policies for that, and so that's probably the best place to cover that type of risk. But yeah, I mean, at some point we would love to have something to like help cover people's deductibles or that type of thing.
Well, I mean, I guess I was thinking a little bit more in terms of like, okay, it's shared housing, right? And I'm rooming with Albert, and Albert beats me up. We get into a fight, you know, and
why do I have
and actually, that's true, right? And Albert's the one who mentioned guns, like, you know, like something real serious happens, something goes down. I mean, I don't know, is that covered only if someone can prove that you guys were negligent in approving that person?
Yeah, I mean that would be it, right? I mean, otherwise, like the person who's the liable party would be
the bad guy.
Yeah, the bad guy, right? I mean, the same way that would be. I mean, pick an airport, for instance, or a mall, and the bad guy shows up to the mall or the airport or the school or whatever.
Right.
It's not like, oh, well, you had a place for public congregation where people are hanging out. Or, I mean, even a hotel. A hotel's a great example. Like in the hallway, it's not like you're doing background checks on your hotel residents or your people who stay at your hotel. If someone assaults someone else in the hallway, like who's responsible? Are you going after the hotel? No, like that would be asinine. You're going after the guy who did the bad thing. And so, you know, that type of case I think is still pretty comparable.
So you've not run into that scenario yet?
No, don't get me wrong. Like, yeah, I mean, anytime someone has something that costs money, they come knocking on our door. but yeah, I mean, it's I had an exchange with an owner recently. Like, look, it's not different from our expectation for our members that we expect to be kind, independent, respectful adults. We expect our owners and our customers generally to be reasonable, and we think that we are reasonable actors in the space, and we certainly are motivated to want to keep you as a customer if you're a good customer, and just be a good actor in the market. Mm-hmm. But yeah, it hasn't been a major issue.
All right, that's good. All right. Okay. So we're already an hour in, and Atticus, thank you so much for your time.
Of course.
Why don't we start wrapping up? And I know I have one really cool question from the audience, so maybe I'll start with that, and then we could all just kind of wrap up. So the question again comes from Bill. I think Bill's like real passionate about this.
Go, Bill!
He'll be
Thanks,
reaching
Bill.
out to you.
Thanks, Bill.
So this is Bill's question. Just agreeing with you that you guys are a mission-driven company. Given that, are you looking to partner with other social good innovators that bring synergy, if not complete alignment with your mission? If so, what criteria would you use to assess that fit?
So yeah, I mean, I think it's just where they fit in the ecosystem, and I absolutely think about what we're doing as it's not just building a company; it's building an ecosystem of support around these folks. And so the answer is absolutely. We have a couple formalized partnerships right now. With Isuzu, who reports credit scores, or with Winolo, who does kind of gig work, economy stuff, and with some telemedicine providers as well. But and then we have a lot of informal partnerships with loads of different groups who just generally fit into the ecosystem. So yeah, would absolutely be happy to talk more, and you can find me anywhere. I'm pretty easy.
Oh, we'll ask you about that as we're ending up. Any wrap-up comments from our panel?
Yeah, I have a wrap-up comment. So, Atticus, I'm planning to move to Atlanta sometime in this year. And so I want to say, like, there's a need. There's definitely a need. I'm thinking, like, I want to just kind of land. I don't know if I fit in the customer base, but I want to land and, something short-term, temporary. And it's really painful to do that. And so if you make it easy on me, you might have a customer.
Sweet.
So really looking forward to it. And I'm definitely look at you. I'm definitely look at Padsplit to see if there's some rooms that would be a good fit. So I'm going to combine a very last question, which is, so can I establish like residency and stuff like that through Padsplit, right? Like driver's license and bank account. So what does that process look like real quickly? So this is a very selfish question too, and really looking to I'm really looking to use it. I'm really looking to use it.
Listen, I've been in Atlanta now for 19 years. It's been a long time since I had to establish residency and get my license set up and everything. So I'm certainly not the expert by any stretch on how to do that, but I know that tons of members move from out of state and do it all the time and get mail delivered to the address and everything.
Awesome. I'm gonna look you guys up. That's a promise.
I love it. The one thing that we didn't touch on, and I would love to kind of leave with this, because I think it's really the core of any company. It's kind of the DNA, and the DNA of the company is really all about the team and their dynamics. So, just sort of quickly, Atticus, can you give us a bit of a sense of your team? How many people work with you? Kind of like, what does the team look like?
Yeah. So like I said, I mean, I think we're almost 90 now, if we're not, between
90.
FTEs and full-time contractors. We're completely international. Since we were at least our dev team was remote international prior to COVID. And since COVID, we've gone completely remote, and it's really just opened up the hiring pool. But yeah, I mean, we're a K4 company as well, and impact engine. And so we make commitments to diversity, and really proud of our hiring and recruiting process as well. And I in the same way that we talk about creating impacts for our members, it's absolutely true for our owners and certainly our employees as well. And we have a phenomenal group, and really super proud of them. But everybody that's here is, I think, wears that the kind of social impact DNA through and through.
Awesome, thank you.
Yeah.
All right. I think with that, we're gonna let you go. This has really been an amazing conversation. Love kind of what you guys are up to. I still have a lot of questions and concerns, but I'll think through all of those. And
so do I.
I know. Hopefully we'll talk about all this in the future as well. So with that, I'd love to say thanks for your time, Atticus, and then bring Drew on so we could talk about you behind your back. Although it'll be live, so
Yeah, so you can log in.
Yeah, I was gonna
see what we say.
Cool. Cool.
All right, thank you, Atticus.
Awesome. Thank
Thanks,
you, guys.
Great
Atticus.
meeting you, Atticus.
All right, see ya.
All the best.
All right, let's bring
Oh.
Drew on. There he is.
Drew,
Hey there, am I live?
You are
live.
live.
Awesome.
Yeah.
he's alive.
I'm live. Yeah, I do have a little accelerated timeline. So
Yeah.
I got to leave in about 15 minutes to go pick up my.
Yeah.
Perfect.
So
But,
give us your take on these guys.
I mean, I've loved this model ever since I saw it, and I mean, those that know me know that my past company was a kind of private home sharing application called Horizon. So think like kind of couch surfing / Airbnb within trusted communities. And actually, I think that's some of what Bill's question was getting at in terms of micro communities. So imagine like a Padsplit type thing, but within the Peace Corps or within Teach for America or within like communities where there's existing trust. So it's not strangers per se. So like one of the use cases for that platform that I was thinking about was absolutely how do we unlock this massive amount of spare bedrooms that sits empty all day long, right? Like we have 2 empty bedrooms sitting in this house right now, and like there's issues with that, right? Most people don't really want just random strangers in their house. Yes, there's some financial considerations for a lot of people, but not everyone. So I was like with Horizon, I was always working on like, how do you get some of that inventory? And Padsplit's a similar, like taking a different approach, right? Like more of a financial approach, transaction approach, but like they're addressing some of that, like trust, security, kind of like they're modernizing that process. So it's very clear to me that like you can, I mean, solving the inventory challenge is going to be exponentially faster to unlock the existing rooms that exist rather than build new rooms in the world.
Okay. Lynette, Albert.
I like how you just leave it at okay. That's so unlike you just to leave it at that.
I'm a, you know.
Rob's
I'm
like,
gonna
good
let you
point.
guys talk first.
I mean, I philosophically, I completely agree, Drew. I mean, you know, just from a pure economics point of view, it seems like there's a supply, there's a demand that seem, you know, if you can kind of bridge that gap. I think there's so many components around it. And I think, you know, the biggest piece is really, and Emily hit it early on, and I'm sure this is what they're challenged with as well, right? Is, I mean, it's the profitability question, but then there's also the regulatory question. And I think those are the 2 biggest challenges. Is one is driven by the other. I guess it depends on which day you're looking at, who's driving who. But, you know, often the regulations, you know, are in the way of sort of the average homeowner's ability to be able to maximize profit. And on the other hand, you know, do you want to really sort of set regulations that limit the ability for some of these institutional investors to get in because they drive other economic components as well, right? And so I think there's a bit of a challenge there. And, you know, just sort of, you know, taking all the hats off and just looking at it purely from an industry point of view, it's a great way that, you know, some of these organizations like NAR and others who are advocating for affordable housing could lean in on the regulation side, right? And still meet some of the objectives on the investment and moving inventory side. And I think there's an opportunity, but I don't think it's just through the solution like Padsplit. I think it has to be the solutions plus all of the ancillaries that are helping move some of those hurdles as well. I feel for them. I mean, I love their mission. I just think they have some challenges ahead of them.
Yeah, just to kind of latch onto that, I think as soon as anybody hears any of these models, like you immediately think of all the things that can go wrong, right? And I love that, to be honest with you. So because you need things to be really operationally challenging, and you need things to be really hard because everybody would do it if it wasn't. So that's that first piece. That's in the DNA of any startup, is how do we solve some of these really tough problems? And the second piece is solving those problems gives you the competitive advantage to last in the long run, and hopefully be able to also bring data and bring all these other things that can provide, right, protection from competition. So this is how you get better. So I love that it's so challenging. I love that because the challenge to me is like fundamentally, how do you get people to live well together, sort of, you know what I mean? Like, how do that's hard. I mean, that's really hard. And
Yeah.
And I do think that if they can get good at that and have an advantage over other people, then there's a lot of value to be unlocked that I don't think we're even seeing right now. That's hard to realize.
Well, Albert, you hit such a good point. I thought about this earlier in the interview too. Like, I wonder if now, like this particular piece of time doesn't give them that opportunity to really hone in on that, because, all of the data shows that through the pandemic and socially isolating people is having massive implications on like mental health and some of those challenges that community and socialization really affect. So you're absolutely right. If they could get that part right, they could start solving some of these other components as well, right? Like, how do we match you with your community? Like, I think that's really cool.
Lynette, can I follow on that really quickly? So I absolutely agree, but I think there's also, going to like what could go wrong, there's also a flip side of that, of like when you're talking about living together during a pandemic, more time together means like kind of more potential challenges, because everyone is like, those conflicts will come to light, same way they have with a lot of relationships, and like the divorce rate going way up. Like, people realize that really quickly. So I think that goes to kind of the importance of that matching mechanism. And like, I actually think that is where it leads into that micro community of the Peace Corps type scenario of like, there's very little chance that a Peace Corps volunteer is going to like not get along with another Peace Corps volunteer. That's a kind of extreme case. Not every community is like that, obviously. But I do think the matching component becomes exponentially more important if people are spending more and more time together in a living scenario.
Look, I mean, I think there's a million wrong things, right? I mean, I could easily come up with like, and I put this in the private chat, like, this company is one rape away from, just, you know what I mean? Like, it's, because again, I get what he was talking about with hotels and airports. I'm like, dude, there's a difference when we're talking about your home. I think people have a very different expectation going to a hotel and then something terrible happening, and going home and then something terrible happening, right? So we could talk about all the bad or horrible things that could happen. And to Albert's point, if these guys figure that out, oh my God, the opportunity. Yeah. Thing I'm thinking about is, what if they figure it out and they're successful, okay? Because here's what I'm looking at. If I'm an investor, so one of the things that I've been concerned about the last 5-6 years, because this affordable housing shit has not been some new problem, right? This has been going on for decades. We've already been worried about renter nation, right? Because homeownership rates are dropping more and more and more. And obviously in 2021, we've got this situation where even middle-class families are going, I don't know if I could ever buy a house. I feel like what this model does, if it's successful, is it really incentivizes landlords to go to this model, which then removes rental inventory from families. And that's actually something that kind of concerns me. And this is if they're successful. Do you know what I mean? If they're humongous successful, as you mentioned, the TAM, the market opportunity is amazing. If I'm an investor and I bought it, the minute he says that, you're right, the first bedroom is market rate. Second and third bedroom is always much cheaper, right? If I could split those up and rent each bedroom to a single, low-income guy, then I make a lot more money, and it makes more affordable housing available. That is true for the people who fit the Padsplit profile. It's not true if we're talking about a family with a child. Do you know what I mean? Or family with 2 kids, and they're working class, and they're trying to make things meet. Right now, they have to go rent a place. Well, if the landlords are incentivized to move away from that model, where are we then? Like, it actually concerns me if these guys are successful with their mission. Am I crazy for thinking that?
You're not crazy, but I think like they would love to be in that dilemma, right?
Of course,
like,
they would. Yeah, but would we?
I mean okay, so I get you, but that kind of creative destruction is a really natural part of kind of how all industries evolve. So I would love to see them splashing, right, and making people be like, hey, how do we solve this like single family issue, or sorry, like the family rental issue. So that's not really something that should be put on their plate, in my opinion. Like, they should just do the best they can to eat that market and then see what happens. That's where I stand.
Well,
Yeah.
and I don't know that we're that far away from it anyway, Rob. I mean, whether or not you have a pad split, right? Just given the way the economy is going, right? And the fact that you don't have the ability for middle class families to own homes, and you have massive investment going on in the housing market right now, owners are already incentivized to maximize the return on that investment. And how do they do that? I mean, there's no organized way to do it, but it doesn't mean that they can't do it now, right? And especially because that gap is widening, I think there's even more incentive for some of these investors to get creative with how they market. And, you know, interestingly, again, just like the affordable housing issue isn't brand new, I go back to, I think it was Lisa's comments in the chat where she talked about her daughter's experience. Well, like I went to university 25 years ago, and that was exactly the model that existed then. You buy a townhome and you rent it out to 5 kids from across the country that have never met each other before. They each get a room, they figure it out, right? Maximize the return on that investment, you know? And so, you know, I think the fact that we have technology and platform-based approaches now, does it accelerate it? I don't know. I think that's the interesting thing is, does it accelerate some of these models, and does it accelerate, you know, the widening of these gaps? I don't know. That's interesting.
I can't agree with Lynette more. So meaning I had the same question of how is this different now? Like, what are the new opportunities when you can roll this up and you have more access to data, you have more access to know-how? And I actually think there's a ton of those opportunities. And it's not that they can be doing those now, but that's what I find particularly fascinating. And I want to step back a little bit and say, I love this startup, by the way. I think the quality of startups we've gotten so far in the blueprint sessions, I just love them. I love like every single one. I'm like, that's awesome that we have these great companies solving through these problems. So, and I love it because I'm exactly their customer base, right? I've lived in shared homes. I did it in Korea. I did it in the States. I did it when I was a grad student, and largely the experience was awesome. Like I love sharing, you know, being in those homes, and I kind of want to do it now. And so, you know, I think it's awesome, and I'm like totally rooting for these guys. I love the mission. I love everything about it, to be honest with you. And so, you know, there's all these downsides, but look at all the upsides too. I want to point out one upside, okay, to potentially what can happen here. And I took a deep dive into like co-living situations, and what was interesting is, a lot of the revenue, the potential revenue you can create is not from just like the rent or, you know, a lot of it is like add-on stuff, like, you know, adding on services, right? Like laundry, like collective laundry, video, you know, streaming, right? Subscription for everybody.
Internet access.
Right? And all of these things. And so there's really a lot of opportunity there for something like this if they get it right. And what I say get it right is, they have to make the experience awesome. It can't be like good enough.
Yeah.
I think they have to be like, hey, living in Padsplit, like sharing a room, dude, if you do it through Padsplit, there's all these benefits, right, that are just huge, right? And I just love that the ability to live with different people safely, right? And so imagine solving that problem. There's so much opportunity there, you know, particularly because it is so difficult. So I just want to be like rah. No, I would love to like. Okay, anyway, I'll stop there. But
you're just saying that because you want to live in a pad split when you get to Atlanta.
Yeah.
So you know,
He's promoting.
I totally want to live in a pad split. Hey, Atticus, if you're listening, you got a discount code. Hooking you up, bro.
I want to live in a
You're the
pad
last
split
person in the world who should get a discount. He should charge you double. I mean, you're ain't that
low income. I am the customer base is looking at.
No, you are not. You don't make $18,000 a year or whatever. He's going for.
I make zero. I make zero right now.
Not wealthy, former Google
I am like
execs.
the poorest individual here.
There's real quickly before I jump, there is a follow-up opportunity on this that I think is super compelling and interesting, but it would require kind of a different business model on it. And that is, to me, a kind of operating system for communes. So, I mean, there's like kind of, these communes exist all over the place already. Like actually, I stayed in one in Boston, 8-bedroom house, like kind of run by one person. They bought the house. They do all their vetting and like self-runs. It was an amazing experience to stay there for 4 days. but they're not going to pay kind of a placement fee. Like they don't have problems getting people into their commune, right? But like there probably is a SaaS model of like just give the software to those people that already have those sorts of units on a monthly or yearly subscription, and like maybe add on some of the services and like take over utilities and like kind of make it a little bit easier from an admin perspective for the people that are running those to kind of keep doing it. I think that is kind of a super interesting long-term opportunity that I think there absolutely should be more communes in the world. And I think part of the reason there's not is because it is incredibly like labor intensive to do them. So software could help that in some, not entirely, but like in some capacity.
That's a pretty big left turn there. Drew.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, listen, let's wrap up. Final thoughts on these guys.
I
Start
love
with
them.
Lynette. Okay, we'll start with Albert, I guess.
No, I'll wait.
No, you started,
Yeah,
man. Go ahead.
Go.
Yeah. I know you're gonna be a customer, so you love them. Okay.
I'm absolutely going to
Final
be a
thoughts.
customer. So again, there's a lot that I love. I've already said what I love. Like the problem's hard, the opportunity. I think there's a lot of hidden opportunity there that people haven't seen because they haven't seen that reality. And if they are positioned there, they're going to be able to experience some of the things that you're talking about. Like, hey, how do you like live together well? And nobody's really been able to get it. And so, and if a company is positioned there, to get those insights and then to operationalize it, I think there's going to be opportunities there that we just haven't seen. And that's what's really healthy about a model like this. I think just looking at the problems they have to solve right now, yeah, they have big problems to solve. But if they can start gaining scale, then we're talking about they're going to be uniquely positioned to solve some of these problems. And so, that's what I find incredibly exciting. And I think these guys are driven by that too. If they are mission driven, they're going to be thinking, how do we make sure that people can live with dignity and happiness, even if they can't really afford it right now, right? Like they can't really afford like this one house. And so, and the second piece of this, and this is getting also to what Drew is saying, is alternative living arrangements, man. I mean, it's going to happen. It's already happening, right? Like people don't really like living in families that much anymore. A lot of people don't. A lot of single people want to live with different people. They want to, right? They want to have different experiences. And honestly, it's fun and it's great, right? Like, especially when we're living in a world of loneliness, right? We're living in like the big pandemic right now is loneliness pandemic.
Yeah, for sure.
And so creating like these different types of alternative arrangements, and they're just scratching the surface right now. They're like going for the low hanging fruit right now to me, but there's going to be better fruit down the line that none of us can imagine. But these guys are going to have the front seats, if they're really pushing at it, to be able to produce different types of arrangements that are, financially make sense. And so I love it. Maybe I'm like over intellectualizing it, but that's what I see immediately. And I think Atticus and all these guys, they are probably 3 levels deeper than what we're talking about right now. In, what they're able to see. And that's what I love about startups and entrepreneurs is that they are digging so deep and they're seeing different possibilities. Hopefully they are, right? And that's what creates like cool shit that we can enjoy later on as the public, right? And I totally get that sense from Atticus and speaking to him. So I'm on board. I'm on board
All
with
right.
you guys.
Yeah.
It's true.
Let me jump in.
Yeah.
Let's just say one thing and then I'm going to go. So, I mean, I absolutely love the mission. Like everything about it is spot on. And I think Atticus and Albert are right in terms of like, there are very few people willing to do that work that they're doing. And like, if they can stick to their guns and keep that mission ingrained in what they do and like stick with it for a couple of years, they're going to have a massive like advantage compared to anyone else that's trying to recreate that or compete against them. So with that,
all right,
love it, and I'm out of here.
See you, Drew.
All right,
Yeah, Drew.
bye.
Lynette.
Well, I'm gonna just add maybe a tempered perspective along that line, because I think you're right. They could do all those things, but in terms of their mission, that's not their mission right now. He was very clear at the beginning of this conversation. There were 2 problems they were solving. One was lack of housing supply, and one was access to housing. had nothing to do with social communities. Those are layered on complexities. And I tend to agree with you, Albert. I think that's where the future is an alternative living arrangements, but that's not their current mission. And so, yes, they have a leg up if they're able to, shift their focus and their core strategy toward that. Because, I was just listening to something this morning, which talked about the fact that you're absolutely right. Loneliness is becoming the biggest pandemic, and partly it's not because of the pandemic. It's because as humans, we're now more able to move around, right? 30 years ago, we had on average 3 friends. Now we have on average 1.5 close friends, right? It's because we don't live at home anymore. We move around. You've lived on how many continents, Albert, right? And so, I think that is a huge piece of the conversation. And absolutely, these guys would have a leg up if that becomes a part of their core mission. But that's only if, because if not, to your point earlier, there are 100 other models coming on stream that if that is their core mission, they could solve it faster because they would set up differently. They would structure differently to address that as a mission. So the opportunity is there. Whether or not they're willing and ready to lean in and then scale toward it, I think that's another question.
Okay, so I think, I have significant concerns about these guys. I like them. Atticus is incredibly smart. He's obviously thought about it a whole bunch. Everything Albert said is all true. There's a part of that wishes that they would actually do this overseas first. I know that sounds a little weird, but I think it's because I could easily see perfecting this type of model in a place like, say, Japan or Seoul, like Korea, where you have a lot more uniformity and a lot more sort of shared cultural context where you're not going to find some of the problems you will here in the States. I hate to put it that way, but it is what it is. The other thing that I think about is, I don't know if it's these guys. I don't know if it's their job to do this. But you know how like the most successful sort of technology startup type stuff is we go from luxury downstream, right? Meaning like, mobile phones were something that only the very wealthy had, and then it moved downstream. Anything, any real major technology product was something like Uber. It was really like black cars and limos that was brought downstream to the mainstream, right? So kind of what Albert was talking about, we're talking about this experience has to be awesome, right? This can't be just a whole bunch of poor people sitting in a, rooming house, like feeling miserable. This has to be something awesome. And there's a part of me that feels like someone proving this model, all the technology, all the data, all the operations, with maybe more of the high-end audience, whether that's college students or wealthy professionals in major urban areas or whatever, figuring that out and then moving downstream to affordable housing. I wonder if that's not a better approach, right? Which is not to take anything away from their mission. I love the mission. You got, Lynette, especially you, and I've been concerned about affordable housing forever. I think millennials and Gen Z are absolutely fucking screwed when it comes to that. So yeah, anything that sort of helps to that, great. Maybe not anything because I'm not Drew and I don't think communes are great. But something like this could be like an amazing answer to that.
Maybe you would though.
Yeah, but you know what I mean? Like there's a part of me that feels like maybe prove it right first. Imagine if this becomes like the preferred way of living in New York and San Francisco. Yeah. And these cool hip cities, and then it goes downstream, right? And I don't know. There's a part of me that feels kind of like that.
But this is what I mean. This is what I mean, Rob, in terms of where they've come from, right? They've been at this for 5 years, and they came at this from a very different place. So they've kind of started in this middle place where, if they would have, if you could scrap it and start over again, would you start with a different type of home, right? Creating a different type of experience. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm saying. If they don't make that shift to try and address it from that, somebody else will, right? And that's going to be a much more lucrative path than this heavy grind from the bottom, I think, where they've kind of come from.
I respect them for the heavy grind. I respect
totally.
Them for the mission,
I do too.
But there's a part of me that feels like, maybe it takes a luxury end to figure this out first and then bring it downstream as opposed to going the other way. That's all.
So just to comment to that, I don't think that's the only path. I think you can go up, down, right? A lot of freemium models are just basically based on that. First, you create something that everyone can use, and then you create premium on top of it. So, and also, how do you get those insights? right? To create what's really good. Well, you need movement. You need to see what that looks like on the market. So I think it's very valid to go either way. I don't think that's really, I think that's more theory speak, like meaning I think you can actually, when you're creating a platform, you can start adding stuff as you gain more scale and you gain more knowledge. And I think we've seen plenty of examples of that as well, right? So I don't think that necessarily you have to go top, like kind of high market to low market. I actually don't believe that. So
well,
but it is hard. I mean, it is hard to grow a platform. That's, I mean, any platform business, and that's again, having done it, right? Like, it's fucking hard, and shit like happens that you're just like, what? Like, how does that show up, right? But the thing is that I want to say is that's where the value is. Instead of being like, oh, that was horrible, or oh God, how do we deal with this? When you start solving those problems is when you see the openings. I'm gonna tell you that. Like, that's what we experienced at Ella Market. It's what a lot of companies have experienced is like, right? Like eBay, for instance. Oh, I can't talk. But, you know, people who are like, hey, as we're running this business, here's the big pain point that we have to solve and what a lot of customers are faced with. Well, let's solve this pain point. And then that actually turns out to be the bigger value proposition, right? So, you know, I actually think that this approach, like this is the way that, you know, the path that they're taking has a lot of positives built in, right? If they really keep driving at their mission. But if they stop at like, oh, we're just gonna like get this business model working and just rent out rooms, then I think it turns to flat Diet Coke and anybody can do it, right? And but you know, so where the path
well,
they're
Albert, I'm super interested in looking forward to your review,
Yeah,
your
absolutely.
your Padsplit experience when you move to
Absolutely.
Atlanta.
Yeah.
I am super
Yeah.
looking forward to your review.
Yeah, absolutely.
yeah.
Hey,
Totally gonna do it.
this was great. God, we're 2 hours in this, so hey, thank you guys for doing this, and thanks to anybody that was stayed with us through the whole 2 hours. That seems insane to me. But we'll have this edited and, you know, reproduced as well. And
Shout out to Bill, huh? Shout out to Bill.
Bill.
I know. Yeah, I think Bill needs to be reaching out to Atticus. All right.
Yeah, exactly.
With that, see you guys next month when we have the next one.
See ya.
All right.
Sounds great.
Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye.